Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, executive coach, founder, and CEO of Built to Last Solutions, Marvin Chambers. Hey, what you drinking? Man, I have taken to calling that the Superman syndrome, where every leader shows up. Thank God I'm here to save the day, and I can go into battles and bullets are going to bounce off my chest, and that works really well from a sense of bravado. But we all know that that's a bunch of hooey. The first one in the battle is the one that gets shot first. And I just had this conversation with another leader a couple of episodes ago, who is a former chief of police. We talked about how it's tempting when you're a leader, it's tempting to want to go in and grab the gun and rush into the mob to demonstrate that I can still do what I used to be able to do. But when you're the chief of police or when you're the leader, is that the most productive use of your time and effort? If the leader's not sitting at 10,000 feet directing the entire army, then who is? It seems very prudent that we distinguish between what's effective and what is really just a stroke of your ego. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at right now.
Absolutely. If you can help people put the ego aside, again, with my spiritual element of coaching, now maybe we'll say it, I kind of use ego to stand for edge guard out. When we don't edge guard out of this scenario and the situation, you can be amazed at what you can actually accomplish. Right. And so that's what often is really happening in those moments. They're choosing their ego. They're choosing the other side versus, coming from a place of love, quite frankly. And when they come at the challenges in the organization from that perspective, how things work out in their favor. I was actually on that point having a session with a CFO of a university today. And we really talked about that, how he had to finally get comfortable with the fact that his way of leading wasn't about being the bull in the china shop, always being the first to run into the battle right away, not to yell and to scream and shout out orders, but to come at things from a sense of care and a sense of compassion, and that he didn't always think that was okay. And he's kind of come to the conclusion that that is okay. In fact, that's quite frankly needed, given the world that we live in today.
Yeah, love it. A favorite quote of mine from Mr. Ken Blanchard. He says that in leadership, there's no right or wrong. There's only effective and ineffective. So we get tied into this definition of we've got to do it this way because this is what my professor said, or this is what this book said. Well, I mean, what the book said is a suggestion, but either it's going to work or it's not going to work, right? So there's no right or wrong. There's only effective and ineffective. I want to talk a little bit about the jazz element of this, because a couple of your jazz favorites, I was actually kind of surprised and relieved to see Sade. We haven't heard from in a while. I'm just anticipating that at some point she's going to come out with a new offering, and we're going to be like, "Where in the world have you been?" But I want to talk to you about Wayman Tisdale. And for those who don't know who Wayman Tisdale is, or for those who only know part of who Wayman Tisdale was, he was a basketball phenom from a very, very young age, just incredibly, incredibly talented on the basketball court. He led the Oklahoma Sooners, I think, to a national championship. His freshman year, he was being touted as, I don't know if he became the National Player of the Year as a freshman, but he was in the conversation, which was totally unheard of. He goes on to the NBA, has a really, really solid career, and then he becomes a bass jazz guitarist, and he has an equally stellar, probably even more stellar, career as a jazz musician. Now, my connection to Wayman Tisdale is I actually played basketball against Wayman Tisdale. I actually played basketball against him. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. The story goes, I want to get to you, but the story goes, I was playing, I don't know, fifth or sixth grade, and my dad was coaching this church league. So we were playing regular basketball, but then we also had a church league. And in the church league, he was he was one of the high schoolers playing in the church league. I'm junior high, fifth or sixth grade, and there's this church league choir that we are assembling at our church, going to go around to the malls and sing in the choir. And then he comes to be part of the church league choir. We're meeting in the gym to rehearse. And my dad, God bless him, he starts talking smack to Wayman Tisdale, who's almost 6'8" at this point. That's not bad, but he was throwing me in the crosshairs of that smack he was talking. He was like, "Yeah, Wayman, I hear you pretty good, and I see the clippings, but I've seen some faults in your game. As a matter of fact, my son here can take you to the hole." And I'm like, "Dude, why you getting me in this, right?" I'm fifth grade. He's in high school. They're already comparing him to NBA greats. And because of that, Wayman says, "All right, well, let's just settle this right now." And he grabs a basketball and he rolls it out. And, I do my best with my two moves. And I actually get past Wayman. And I go up to lay the ball up. And then out of nowhere, this arm comes and sends that ball up into the rafters. I don't think we ever found that basketball. So that's been my connection. Why would Wayman Tisdale be on your list, especially as a favorite jazz musician?
You already kind of explained why. I'm not a big jazz person, quite frankly. What attracted me to him, and I heard him at a few kind of jazz events in the Maryland, DC area, what really attracted me to him is his story. That I did as a little kid, followed him when he played at Oklahoma and went into the league and when he was on the Olympic team and all that stuff. But what really kind of grabbed me was the fact that he was multi-talented, multifaceted, and that he could make that type of transition. And that's something I kind of looked at and always kind of admired, that ability to make such a drastic, at least appearing to us on the outside, such a kind of drastic shift or transition in careers and be equally successful, if not more successful, as a musician. So that really is what, for me, is really that attracts to him. The fact that I saw him as a fan of basketball and then be able to kind of transition to something else and be just as effective. Because it kind of goes back to kind of my theme through this conversation. He's truly living his truth. That, sometimes, how many times we heard about people and players that also all they could do is think about their identity from one perspective. That he had the courage and ability to kind of shift and redefine himself, which I think is really important for us to be able to do, to understand that we are not just what we say we are, right? We like to kind
Wait. You need to back up and say that again. You need to say that one more time. That is strong. We are not what? You said we are not
just what we say we are, right? We like to go, "Oh, I play basketball. Oh, I'm an executive coach. Oh, I do this." So we like to look at ourselves in terms of our positions from a material perspective: a husband, a father, a brother, a sister, all those kind of definitions. And that is true. But what happens is those are identities that often we allow kind of like trap us and don't allow us to reach our full potential, because we let that identity determine our fate, versus understanding we can be whatever we need to be in that situation, right? How many times you hear people go, "Oh, I can't do that because that's not who I am. I'm an introvert," or "I'm a salesperson. I'm not a finance guy," all that stuff. You have the agility to do whatever it is that you need to do for the moment. So I think that's part of what we do. And seeing how Mr. Tisdale kind of lived his life is really a testimony to the kind of way, we look at what we do as coaches.
Oh my! It's so true, and I was always attracted to Wayman for the exact same reason, just his ability to not redefine himself, but to hold multiple definitions of himself. Because there were stories about how he would take his bass guitar on the bus when they're on their way to the next basketball game. He's got his guitar with him, and that was his thing. He held multiple definitions of himself. And as I think about your list of invisible board director, all of them seem to carry that same theme of having a strong personhood, but not being boxed in by that personhood, not being boxed in by that definition. Could you talk through the folks that you've assembled for your invisible board of directors, and why did you choose those people to be the folks that you think about when you have to make tough decisions?
Oh, that's great. The first one, I guess I wasn't sure if I was allowed to put in was Jesus Christ. And I think that goes without saying why I would want him on the list. And all powerful, all omnipotent, ever present. That thing that goes without saying. But I also had Muhammad Ali on the list. Again, this notion of being able to deal with adversity, being able to stay true despite all the odds, despite the naysayers, despite all the detraction, despite all the vitriol and hate and everything, but stay true to who he was. I think there's lots of wisdom there. Wayne Dyer as a kind of a coach, but also known for his spiritual leadership. The notion, he talks a lot about this notion, which we talked about the ego, and how if we're able to kind of move through the ego, how anything for us is really possible. Edgar A. Love, which is, I mentioned earlier, one of the founders of Omega Psi Phi, and as a bishop and as kind of a foundation tenets, when clearly you can see his foundational tenets of Omega Psi Phi that we don't often talk about as much in terms of the spiritual aspect of the essence of the fraternity and what we do and how we do it. Robert Smith, in terms of being a billionaire and being able to redefine himself and go, you know what, I don't just have to work in investment banking, right? I could be the owner, and what that stands for, and with everything that he's doing now in terms of empowerment, building Black wealth, et cetera. And then Reginald Lewis, given the fact that he's from Baltimore, I'm from Baltimore, and the fact that he's one of the earlier Black trailblazers in kind of redefining who he could be and how he could go about being it. And the fact that he was so bold in how he went about it is something that I think it was bold and humble. Mm. And so that's why I picked those people, for their audacity, for their ability to kind of define themselves the way they want to define themselves. I think for their spiritual elements of who they are and that essence. And then that ability to kind of transcend how others view them, I think is extremely important.
I can see that as a theme running through that entire list. And I can also see that as a theme in all of my experiences with you, that there is a job, there is a position, there is a thing that you do, but then there is the audacity to be more than just that job. I had a couple of interactions with you, business interactions with you, when we were at the same company, and you were the HR person. So yeah, you served the HR role, but then you started providing advice that was beyond the HR department. I mean, how dare you give me sound business advice as the HR person? But you were doing that. You even caused me to think about the financial elements of some decisions. You're the HR person, but yet you were more than that. Hey, look, man, I really want to get into that part of the conversation, but I think we've given enough away for free, man. If you got a few more minutes, I say we had that conversation in the VIP room. You up for the VIP room?
Always down for the VIP. Always down for that.
Well, all right, man. Well, hey, I just before we slide over into the VIP room, man, I just want to raise my cup, raise my 1856, and just tell you how much I appreciate who you have been as a model for me. You have really given me the confidence and the courage to say, well, if Marvin can be more than just this thing that he's doing, then maybe there's space for me to attempt to be more than just this thing that they're asking me to do. And so I have been secretly and at times not so secretly watching you, admiring you. And as I said, when we finally had some legs for this podcast, you were on the list of wanting to make sure that I had this conversation with, because again, you've just always been that one of those dudes for me.
Well, I appreciate that, Galen. I appreciate all that you're doing here. You're really providing not just a service, but I can tell this is a calling for you. And, you're touching many lives from an inspirational perspective, from a knowledge building perspective, and just keep doing what you're doing. I'm a big fan, and I'm going to always be a fan.
All right, man. Hey, well, until next time, until we can get into that VIP room, raise your tea. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.